Stephen Poplin is a hypnotherapist, astrologer, author, and self-described mischief maker. Yeah, that is a good one, isn't it? He's the author of Inner Journeys, Cosmic Sojourns, 2 volumes of life, transforming stories, adventures, and messages from his experiences as a spiritual hypnotherapist. And we have his books out here on the table. Focusing on philosophy and comparative religions, Stephen has studied at universities in the United States and Europe. His professional specialties are focused upon personal and social improvement through self-awareness, spiritual understanding, and internal dynamic motivation. Stephen is currently working on a book on utopia. Please welcome Stephen Poplin.
Hey there. Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Nice to be here. And nice to see other people here in Zoom land, too. I see Matt and Steve and Kathy. Good. Yeah, nice. Hopefully the program has been going well. And hopefully right now, techno talk. I hope I'm clear. You can hear me. You can see me. Any thumbs up? Okay, good. All right. And if I can, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing because we don't have a lot of time. And Ecclesiastes could keep us busy for a while. Okay, so Ecclesiastes, the wisdom of ancient King Solomon. And this is a portrait here by the artist named Simeon. You know, just many great images of King Solomon. And of course, he goes back way back to the point where, I mean, even if we talk about, stories of Jesus and they, say, what did he do? What is true? Anecdotes and stories with Solomon, you go back almost yet another 1,000 years. So getting accurate data about, what is true and what are the real stories. So in Ecclesiastes, the Greek term Ecclesiastes means preacher, derived from the word ekklesia, translated assembly or congregation in the New Testament. And I'm reminded of the Spanish word iglesia, meaning church. Solomon is referred to in the Bible as teacher, preacher, philosopher, and wise king in various translations. King Solomon, the myths, stories, and legends of Solomon, from miraculous wise man to, and this is a quote, probably a fictional character given credit for biblical passages composed of various sources. And so then what's the truth? Again, from what I have seen, what I have studied here, 10th century BCE, perhaps between like 950, 930 BCE, which to us astrologers, that was the age of Aries, fire sign, initiating things, and a rebooting of culture around the world. You can go back perhaps yet another 1,000 years prior to that, or if you listen to Edgar Cayce, you can go much further back talking about the Egyptian cultures. But really, it's just myths and legends when you go back so far. We first come across King Solomon in Kings in the Old Testament, in the first Kings 5. And we hear that right after Solomon has been made king after David died, his father, King David, then he asks for a couple of interesting things, and this kind of like sets the stage for King Solomon in general. So he was out in a temple before he made, by the way, before he had built his own Solomon's temple. That comes a little bit later after this. And he has a dream, and he asks the Lord, how he may do his job ever closer in his ideals. And so the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, ask what I shall give thee. And it says, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, who we know who has passed away. And I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. Give thy servant, therefore, an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this, thy great people? And God, of course, was very pleased with this particular wish. He says, you could have asked for great wealth, you could have asked for a mighty army, but you asked for understanding, you asked for wisdom. And so, yes, I will give you that wisdom and more. I will prolong your life. I will make you rich. You will have a great life. He may not have said it that way, but that's pretty much what he answered and offered. Here is, again, one of the very first things, still in 1 Kings, in the third chapter, 16 through 28. One of the first things that we find him doing is a show of that wisdom and the famous story called the Judgment of Solomon, in which there were two harlots. And I must admit, I didn't know that when I first came across the story, but there it is in the Hebrew Bible. Two harlots living in the same building. They had sons within 3 days of each other. And one woman, while sleeping, turns over and smothers her child underneath her. She's shocked with that, dismayed, but as an evil woman, she gets up, she takes her dead child, takes it over to the other woman, places it there, and steals the live boy. In the morning, the mother, looks at this dead child, in her bed, and looks at him and says, no, this is not my son, doesn't look the same. The other woman stole my child. And bickering and fighting, and of course it came towards King Solomon. And he says, okay, tell me your stories. And they talk about, it's mine. No, it's mine. And then the fight ensues. And he immediately says, bring me a sword. And to be fair, I will give each of you, half of the child. We will cut the child in half. And one woman says, oh, yes, that is very fair. Then both of us will have nothing. And the actual mother then says, oh, please do not do that. Even let this other woman have the child, but spare his life. And immediately King Solomon said, okay, yes, you are the real mother. You care about this child, even if it were not to live with you. So here, I give you your child back. And again, the famous story, and it was celebrated and copied basically by other cultures as far away as China, India, in the centuries after this, with the changing of the stories, but again, a sign of that early wisdom of King Solomon. The interfaith Solomon, and this is from Kings chapter 3. And I mentioned this because, of course, we're talking about the fellowship, the interfaith church. And Solomon became allied to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, by marriage, and took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had made an end of building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall of Jerusalem round about. Solomon had many wives, as many know. Many of these women came from other cultures with other gods and beliefs. There are stories that Solomon had temples and shrines from other religions built. Stephen, I would say that is fair-minded and accepting, but many devout and fanatical Jews in the ensuing centuries never forgave him for that. Blasphemy and abomination. Negative stories began to appear, And this is where it goes quite interesting in the Bible. I remember reading it years ago and seeing that there are different voices in the Bible, and that some things, even in Ecclesiastes, as well as in Proverbs, Kings, there seems to be some editing going on. Other people, adding some different things. For instance, here in Ecclesiastes, in the 7th chapter, it says, "See," this is 27. "See, this is what I found, says the teacher." By the way, that's almost a giveaway, because the rest of it is like he says this in the first person. This is now in the third person, and so this makes me suspicious. "Adding one thing to another to find the sum, which my mind has sought repeatedly, but I have not found. One man among 1,000 I have found who is wise, but a woman among all these I have not found." Pretty patriarchal, pretty, much putting down the women. And yes, I have read this in a couple of different places in the Bible. And I would imagine that a scribe 100 years later, maybe hundreds of years later, a type who wants others to listen to him, but they do not, writes or scribes his rantings and opinions under the name of Solomon. As I said, we had some censure, even, very soon after the time of Solomon. People, displeased because of some of his things that he was kind of like open-minded to do. And there are these memes on social media. For instance, the one with a picture of Abraham Lincoln with the quote, "Don't believe everything you read on social media." And then I asked, did Solomon really write the following? And this is from, again, Ecclesiastes. "Keep the king's command because of your sacred oath. Do not be terrified. Go from his presence. Do not delay when the matter is unpleasant, for he does whatever he pleases. For the word of the king is powerful, and who can say to him, 'What are you doing?'" So, yeah, very interesting stuff. And that's just like a little extra perspective here. Technical stuff. Yeah, I was prepared for that. I think I told Jack that I was prepared for this when the program stops. But I've got to back up. Maybe that was some blasphemy that I was sharing, and I have been stopped by the Lord. We will see. So one of the famous things for King Solomon, vanity, 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 all is vanity. And interestingly enough, the word vanity is used in at least 3 ways, according to scholars. In each case, it looks at the nature of man's many activities under the sun as, number 1, fleeting, which has in view the vapor-like or transitory nature of life. Futile or meaningless, which focuses on the cursed condition of the universe and the debilitating effects it has on man's earthly experience. And then the third option here, incomprehensible or enigmatic, which gives consideration to life's unanswerable questions. Solomon draws upon all 3 meanings in Ecclesiastes. So vanities. I'm using, by the way, the New Revised Standard Bible with the Apocrypha. And so here we have vanities, fleeting life, chasing the wind. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Therefore, there is nothing new under the sun. And then I write here, Solomon, one of the authors, having already stated that not everything I'm reading here in the Bible sounds like it's coming from Solomon, but how do I know? This is like 3,000 years later, but it's some suspicious writing. I said to myself, says Solomon, come now, I will make a test of pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But again, this was also vanity. And here we have like a classic picture of vanity. It's a beautiful a piece of art, by the way, Isaac Ashkenazi, called Vanity. And this is a paradox of an image, because here is King Solomon, who talks about vanity, vanity, and, you're wasting your time, and, and even all of my pleasures and so forth is vanity. But it shows him all in gold, finery, his slaves by his side, and how could someone use such hypocrisy to say vanity when he's just a pure picture of vanity here? I find that very interesting, even though it's a fabulous picture. But we go back to Ecclesiastes and Solomon, and he asks, what can mortals do under heaven during the few days of their life? And this is a big theme that happens again and again, the few days of our life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. This, by the way, might have inspired many a southern plantation owner, and might even be a bit of an issue today, kind of missing those good old days having slaves. But I interject. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and of the provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and delights of the flesh, and many concubines. Oh, did he have many concubines? So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all of my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had spent in doing it, and again all was vanity and a chasing after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. And I think Jack and I can agree it would be really nice to actually have the opportunity to have such wealth and fortune, and then we can make our conclusions about what is vanity. But one of the big things here that it shows up in Proverbs many times, as well as throughout Ecclesiastes, is death. And Solomon realized that all will die equally, the wise and foolish. So what? He said. He obsessed on this and turned to despair. A little bit of overthinking, perhaps. And some who read this consider it the realization of disillusion, loss, and death. And I think at this point, Solomon is knocking on the same door as Buddha, who also was born rich in a royal family and could enjoy anything and everything. Buddha came probably, maybe 4 or 5 centuries afterwards. Solomon looked at the living and the dead and despaired. All of our work, accomplishments, hopes, and dreams were gone in the grave. This was his great dilemma: the passage of time, fleeting moments, and then everything that you have done is gone. But then, right after him lamenting all of that, that leads us into the great and famous passage in Ecclesiastes 3. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Reminds me of a song. And that famous passage we all know, and it has turned indeed into a song. But then after that, he goes on and he says, moving away from despair, I know that there is nothing better for them than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in all their toil. And he remembers or ponders on all souls, human and animals. And I find this very interesting that going back 3,000 years, talking about, or wondering about, the souls of animals. I said in my heart with regard to human beings that God is testing them to show that they are but animals. For the fate of humans and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and humans have no advantage over the animals, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knows whether the human spirit goes upward and the spirit of animals goes downward to the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that all should enjoy their work, for that is their lot. Who can bring them to see what will be after them? I must admit, very wise and refreshing to see that. And so he talks about, of course, then building the temple. And that will keep us busy. And the temple has many different reasons. Coming up with the design, the plan, your plan, all of our individual plans, and keeping at it and step by step building our own temples. Okay. And unity and togetherness. I find this really quite fabulous. Ecclesiastes 4, do not walk alone. As for the case of solitary individuals, without sons or brothers, yet there is no end to all their toil, and their eyes are never satisfied with riches. For whom am I toiling, they ask, and depriving myself of pleasure? This is also vanity and an unhappy business. Two are better than one, because they have good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up the other. But woe to one who is alone and falls and does not have another to help. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though one might prevail against another, two will withstand one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. So again, unity, connections, finding one's pleasures, having also overcome the despair of death and the fleetingness of vanities, and coming to other conclusions. But sometimes you have to read between the lines to find certain things, or maybe skip some passages. And that's bringing me kind of to a classic philosophical perspective of finding the middle way. So this is some wisdom for our time and election year, 2024. Ecclesiastes 7. Do not be quick to anger, for anger lodges in the bosom of fools. Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. I find that rather clever. And he goes on to say, in my vain life, I have seen everything. There are righteous people who perish in their righteousness, and there are wicked people who prolong their life in their evil doing. But do not be too righteous, and do not act too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? A rather strange bit of advice there, but I believe he's talking about, again, the middle way, the balance. Not too much, not too little, not too much of yourself, not defacing yourself too much. And he says again, do not be too wicked, and do not be a fool. Why should you die before your time? Again, much wisdom. And in conclusion, again, build your temple. Find the path to wisdom. I bless you all, and thank you for listening. Any questions? Any answers? And so here's yet another quote here to conclude with this. This is from Ecclesiastes 9. Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful, but time and chance happen to them all. For no one can anticipate the time of disaster. Like fish taken in a cruel net, and like birds caught in a snare, so mortals are snared at a time of calamity when it suddenly falls upon them. And my final words of hope for us all. This is now from Proverbs 16. Gray hair is a crown of glory. It is gained in a righteous life.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay. Good. Blessings. Thank you all.
Daring to bring wisdom on the King of Wisdom. Quite the audacious task, but well done. Thank you.
Good. My pleasure.